Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're uncovering the bizarre, honestly kind of hilarious, and completely accidental true story of exactly how wolves became dogs. I mean, think about the dog sitting next to you right now, or maybe the one you saw on your morning walk. How on earth did a fearsome apex predator transform into a creature that literally cries when you leave the room for 30 seconds? It's one of the most fascinating chapters in all of natural history, and honestly, it didn't happen the way most people think.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. It's 15,000 years ago. You're a hunter-gatherer somewhere out in Eurasia. Your entire life pretty much consists of waking up, finding food, and trying really hard not to die. So you're sitting around your campfire in the middle of nowhere, the darkness is pressing in, and suddenly you hear something rustling just beyond the light. You completely freeze, and then a pair of yellow eyes blinks right at you from the shadows. Now, most animals, they'd either run away or attack, but this one, it just sits there watching you. And something inside you makes you decide, you know what, I'm not going to throw my spear. That exact moment is likely where the entire story of dogs actually begins.
But before we go any further, we need to get one foundational biological fact straight. Dogs are not some naturally occurring, totally separate species that just wandered out of the wild one day. Biologically speaking, they are Canis lupus familiaris. That means they are literally a domesticated subspecies of the gray wolf. Think about that for a second. Every single dog that has ever existed, from a huge, imposing German Shepherd down to a tiny, shaking Chihuahua, shares that exact same fierce lineage. So at some point, humans and wolves had an interaction that went very, very differently than it probably should have.
Now, scientists have debated the exact timeline on this for decades, but the current best estimate puts the domestication of dogs somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago. Let's just focus on that 15,000 number for a second. To put that into perspective, that makes dogs our very first domesticated animal by a massive margin. We're not talking about cows or goats or horses. Horses weren't domesticated until about 6,000 years ago. Dogs were already man's best friend thousands of years before we'd even figured out how to invent farming or bake bread. This whole thing happened deep in the Stone Age. And honestly, this timeline brilliantly illustrates where the old romantic myth of dog domestication completely falls apart. You know the story. A brave prehistoric human finds an orphan litter of wolf pups, takes them home, and trains them to be loyal hunting buddies. It's super heartwarming, but yeah, it's completely false. Adult wolves are fundamentally wild, and you just can't domesticate them like that. You can raise a wolf pup with all the love and warmth in the world, and it will still grow up with dangerous, unpredictable wolf instincts. The scientific reality? Wolves basically domesticated themselves. As early humans got better at hunting, we started leaving behind consistent, reliable garbage. Bones, scraps, things like that. For an opportunistic wolf, an early human camp was basically a Michelin star restaurant. So the wolves that were just slightly less terrified of humans started hanging around to scavenge the leftovers.
Which brings us right into Section 1, the tameness package deal. To really understand how this natural scavenging changed them over time, we have to look at this genuinely extraordinary experiment. So over many, many generations, the wolves hanging out closest to human camps were, by definition, the ones with the absolute lowest stress response around us. The calmest, friendliest wolves got the most food, which means they had the most puppies. Natural selection was operating entirely without human intention here, slowly nudging wolf behavior toward us. But changing their behavior actually ended up changing their biology in ways nobody saw coming. We know this because of a fascinating 1950s experiment by a Russian geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev. Working in Soviet Russia, under the cover of studying fox breeding for the fur industry, Belyaev began this secret project breeding silver foxes. He selected for only one single trait: tameness. Every single generation, he'd only breed the foxes that showed the least fear and the least aggression toward humans. That was the entire experiment.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happened next. Within just a few decades, Belive's foxes didn't just become friendlier, they completely transformed physically. They started developing floppy ears, curly tails, spotted coats of white and brown, and rounder faces. They even started barking differently and actively seeking out human eye contact. And the crazy thing is, Belive hadn't selected for any of those physical traits. He accidentally unlocked what scientists now call domestication syndrome. It turns out the genetic pathways in the brain for a low stress response are deeply, deeply linked to a whole suite of unearned physical changes. Basically, when you breed an animal strictly for friendliness, you get floppy ears as a completely free bonus package deal.
And that takes us to Section 2, biologically rewired for love.
So this self-domestication wasn't just skin deep, it went straight into the canine brain. Dogs are not just wolves that learned how to be polite house guests. They are cognitively and emotionally entirely different creatures. Just look at this simple behavioral comparison. If you point at something across the room, your dog will naturally look right where you're pointing. A wolf? A wolf will completely ignore it. Even wolf pups that are raised intensively by humans from birth just won't reliably follow a pointing gesture. But a domestic dog puppy, even one with super minimal human contact, will immediately follow your finger. This isn't some cool trick they learn, it's literally baked into their genetics. Dogs have been uniquely shaped over thousands of generations to read human communicative cues in a way that literally no other animal on Earth can match.
And it actually goes way deeper than just pointing. In wolf society, making direct eye contact is a dominance challenge. It basically means, hey, a fight is about to start. But dogs evolved to hold your gaze and actively look up to human faces for information. And here's the wild part. When they do look into your eyes, both of your brains release oxytocin. That's the exact same chemical bonding hormone released between a human mother and her infant. It is one of evolution's strangest plot twists ever. A carnivore that, historically speaking, should want to eat us has been chemically rewired to deeply, genuinely bond with us instead. They even developed entirely new physical hardware just to communicate with us. Look at this. Dogs have a tiny facial muscle right above their eyebrows that wolves completely lack. It's called the levator anguli oculi medialis. And this single tiny muscle is entirely responsible for that famous puppy dog eyes expression. You know the one. It makes their faces look incredibly sad, super soft, and just unbearably cute. And why did they evolve this very specific muscle? Simple, because it works on us. It is a brilliant biological hack that manipulates human emotions so we feel absolutely compelled to take care of them. Your dog's ancient ancestors spent millennia evolving just to make you want to choose them. All right, moving right along to section 3, the intentional era. So as these wild wolves became slightly less wolfy, humans eventually realized just how incredibly useful they were. They could act as living, breathing alarm systems for the camp, and they could help track prey. This massive realization shifted our relationship into a brand new era where humans actively took the wheel of canine evolution. By about 10,000 years ago, back when early humans were really just starting to figure out agriculture and build permanent villages, dogs were already deeply, permanently embedded in our society. And we know this for sure because of archaeology. From this period, researchers find ancient human graves that also contain dog bones, and they definitely weren't buried as food. They were buried with care, as companions. In some sites, a human hand is even found carefully resting on the animal's body. This was a profound, massive leap into genuine emotional companionship. People living in absolutely brutal survival conditions were spending their precious emotional energy grieving their dogs. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because watching this relationship accelerate over time is just staggering. We start roughly 15,000 years ago with opportunistic wolves eating garbage on the edge of camp. Then by 10,000 years ago, we see those incredibly moving and careful companion burials. Fast forward to the 19th century, and suddenly humans are completely obsessed with extremely precise, controlled breed standards. And today, in the modern era, we literally have dogs sleeping in our beds, getting expensive physical therapy, and eating $40 artisanal, grain-free, salmon-based dog food. The explosive acceleration of this whole relationship is just breathtaking when you lay it out like this.
And speaking of that 19th century breeding frenzy, humans went absolutely wild with genetic variety. In basically a blink of evolutionary time, the sleek, ultra-functional wolf body plan, which took millions of years of natural selection to hone, was completely disassembled. We exploited their incredibly flexible genetics to produce literally everything, from the towering, lightning-fast Great Dane all the way down to the English Bulldog, which, let's be honest, is essentially shaped like a very sad loaf of bread that somehow still has a personality. We completely reassembled the wolf to fit our specific working jobs, and sometimes, honestly, just our weird Victorian whims.
Which brings us to our final part, section 4, how dogs created us. It is so easy to look at that recent breeding history and think that humans were entirely in charge the whole time. But as we wrap up this explainer, we really need to look at the broader two-way street of this massive evolutionary partnership, because the story isn't just about how we shaped dogs. So the crucial point here is that this was a co-evolutionary partnership. Unlike cows or sheep that we actively captured and penned in, dogs were active, willing participants in their own domestication. They approached us first. And in return, the human populations that had dogs survived much better. Dogs provided crucial early warnings against predators, they assisted on massive hunts, and there is a very serious scientific argument out there that dogs directly aided human expansion into harsh, unforgiving new environments. Honestly, without dogs, the entire trajectory of human civilization could have been measurably, fundamentally different. That single wolf creeping toward the firelight 15,000 years ago kicked off a partnership that has outlasted every single empire, language, and civilization in human history. It took two completely different creatures from totally different worlds and turned them into something resembling family. So the next time your dog completely falls asleep on your feet or just loses its absolute mind with joy at the sound of your keys in the door, remember this. You aren't just looking at a pet. You are watching 15,000 years of mutual, totally accidental evolution expressing itself right in your living room. That pure happiness is ancient.
It's a bond that was built slowly, accidentally, and, let's be real, at an enormous cost to the rational decision-making of wolves everywhere. But it was definitely worth it for them, and it was certainly worth it for us. Which leaves us with one final, pretty profound thought to ponder today. When we look back at this